All right, thanks for coming and welcome to our second session. This is our evening keynote. We have two very special speakers for you, and we discussed their backgrounds in the program, and I don't need to go through the details of Victor's litany of accomplishments that go all the way back to a very impressive and impactful documentary, which if you haven't seen, you need to definitely see it. And we're going to try to bring him back with Hugo Vasquez in the spring to feature that Color of Fear video, and also maybe some workshops that would get into the structure of it. So I'm trying to tease him along for that. I think he's going to be in the mood. So the point of bringing someone like this in is that he's been an activist for a long, long time, but he's been very well schooled in a lot of the theoretical and practical dynamics of the issues and the approaches to the issues that will raise people's consciousness, will empower individuals, and give them the strength to pass it on to others and to build networks of communities and to use the knowledge that we learn about how we're built physically and psychologically and physiologically, and that can be used and adapted to a lot of different kinds of projects. And we know from history that sometimes those turn into things like fascism and media kinds of definitions of what we're supposed to think and experience. Victor's interested in other applications of our makeup that will help to counterbalance those kinds of forces with community building activities that are much more focused on nonviolence and restorative justice. So he's here because he's been working these problems for quite a while, and we've asked him to share his thoughts with us. We welcome Victor Lewis.
Good evening, brothers and sisters. I am so glad to be here because I live to talk. Seriously, I'm a verbal and emotional exhibitionist. I like to, in fact, I have a kind of a compulsion to share my inner world, what's in my heart and what's on my mind with other people. And if I can be paid for that at the same time, oh, hallelujah. Thank you, God and Goddess. All y'all, thank you. And this started a long time ago when I was 14 years old. I have to thank the janitorial staff at the Cleveland Zoo because I worked for them in my first summer job. They were a multicultural group of higher education incentivizers. They were like college recruiters. They missed many of their teeth. They were obese. They chain smoked. They smelled like garbage. And when the black and brown and white kids from around the neighborhood that I grew up in came to the zoo for our summer jobs, they would say things like, "Go dump that garbage can," and we'd dump the heavy garbage can into the truck. Or, "Go take this sickle and clear all of those tall grasses from that hillside," and we'd, and I thought, this is awful. Then we'd eat lunch together, and they'd laugh at us. I can't wait till you get out of high school so that you can come work with us. And I said, no way. My hands had all these blisters. Now that I really liked having soft hands, I want soft hands again. Now my hands aren't quite as soft as they used to be because I'm finally learning how to garden and throw off the shackles of mental slavery that says that it's a reminder of slavery. It's a PTSD flashback for black people to play in dirt, to be involved in the organic bringing forth of life from the land. Almost all of our food comes out of the dirt directly. So we shouldn't be afraid of that, but I, for most of my life, have been. So yes, I'm happy to sit here and talk, or stand here and talk. I could do it for hours. But I want to leave some time for a question and answer period. Let me get the timer out so I can stop myself. Because trust me, I can do this and have done this for longer than most people can listen. All right, I'm going to try to keep it down to about 30 minutes. I have a few things to say. I'll start by saying that I've been a social activist for almost 40 years. I started as a teenager. My first social activism was around youth liberation and democracy and education for young people. Imagine, if you will, going to a high school that only has about 50 to 80 students, that wherein the 50% of the board of directors for this private institution is students, where the president of the board, not the president of the student council, but the president of the board of directors for the entire 10-year duration of this radical experiment in secondary education was a student, and I was one of those. And where students have primary responsibility for designing their own education, and secondly, they have the deciding interests on the board that hired and fired faculty. So the board of directors that hired faculty was 50% students. President of the board was always a student. And if you wanted to work at our school, you had to face a set of interviewers who had absolute authority, most of whom were under 18. So that was, by the time I got to college, I was like, you gotta be kidding me. And then to have my classmates going, is this gonna be on the test? I was like, cut me a break. If I ever get to be a college faculty, and I said, if you want to fail my class, ask me that question. Think, and I will give you an A. Ask me if it's going to be on the test, I will plot your death. Oh, I'm exaggerating, only slightly. But I would afflict them miserably until they started thinking for themselves, because I thought that's what college and university were supposed to be all about. I moved from, and believe me, I grew up underclass, working class, and black, and could not touch the issue of classism or racism, even though I had firsthand knowledge of how race and class oppression multiplied and distorted the lives of myself and my family members and my neighbors and my friends, because I guess it was just too close. It was like I was so completely embedded in it. I was like, no, that's not my issue. So I went from there to being a kind of an anti-war activist. One of my high school teachers at this wonderful hippie high school that I went to was an activist and a defendant in one of what they call the Kent State 25, I believe. Some of the organizers of an anti-war protest at Kent State University in May of 1970, which resulted in the what was called the Kent State Massacre, the murder of 4 students by the Ohio National Guard. How many people have actually heard about that? How many people haven't heard about that? Oh, with the elbow straight. Put your arm all the way up, like you're half under arrest. Please, before this week is out, check out, do a Google search, you can do it now if you want, on Kent State Massacre. This is very, very important. It was radicalizing for me because I went down to Kent State on the 5th anniversary of this event in 1975. I was a high school student. My social studies teacher, my homeroom teacher, was one of the defendants. He brought one of his comrades into my class, a guy named Robbie Stamps, who had a bullet hole through his cheek from the Ohio National Guard for exercising his constitutional right to say no to the war in Vietnam. And I was like, really? The people with the uniforms and the badges and the stripes and the good guys will shoot you in the face or kill you for exercising your constitutional rights instead of defending those rights? And they said, yep. Okay, so this was the beginning of my radicalism. I've been at it for many years, but I'm not going to talk about my activism or even about your activism as such. What I'd like to talk about is neuroplasticity. That is the power to use your mind to change your brain, to change your mind, to change the world. I'm going to go over this one more time. I want to talk about neuroplasticity, which is applied neuroplasticity, self-directed neuroplasticity. The brain can change. The brain can change itself. We can use our minds, say, use our minds, to change our brains, to change our minds, to change the world. That's the program. If you don't change your mind, you can't change the world. If you don't change your mind, you can't change your brain. Then you can't change your mind to change the world. So I want to talk about how we can and do change our minds and our brains, and why we need to. If you want to change the world, excellent. If you don't want to change the world, make your arrangements, because unless we change our worlds, we won't have much world for much longer. Is that fair to say? I don't want to be a downer, a Dougie Downer, or a pessimist, and I'm not. But I do believe in a certain degree of realism. The technical strength of the human family has reached such a powerful degree that we now have the cleverness to destroy the world 20 times over, maybe more by now. Brother man, Albert Einstein said the splitting of the atom has changed everything save for our mode of thinking. Thus, we drift toward unparalleled catastrophe. What does that mean? That we have become so clever, we have developed such technical prowess as a species that we can destroy ourselves, as well as our enemy, many, many times. Whoever our enemy is, I don't think there is one, except for ignorance, delusion, unbridled aggression, and power without wisdom. That's the enemy, if there is one. But where does the wisdom come from? The wisdom that we need to save the world. I think it comes from changing our minds so that we can change our brains, so that we can change our minds. And that, collectively, to change the world. And why do we need to? Because we live in a society where our brains are not integrated. Our capacity to utilize our aggression and high technology, be that a pistol or a nuclear weapon, to solve problems that the fight, flight, freeze part of the brain was never designed to solve. I am both a spiritual person and a person who accepts the validity of the theory of evolution, which is based upon many decades of carefully examined evidence, going all the way back to Charles Darwin and before. And I don't think this is at odds with anybody's faith tradition, properly understood. But I believe that our brains evolved its alarm system, its threat response system, to deal with problems that are far simpler than anything that the average high school student has to cope with today. When we are startled, when we are threatened by a rattlesnake or a flash flood or a forest fire or an avalanche of snow or rock, all sorts of things start to take place in our brains and in our bodies. There are physiological changes that happen when the fight-flight mechanism comes on, yes? Our hearts start to beat faster. Our blood pressure goes up, right? We start excreting into our tissues adrenaline and cortisol and norepinephrine, all sorts of get ready to run or get ready to fight chemicals are coursing through our bodies. Our emotions become very focused on who is my friend and who is my enemy, where is the threat, and where is safety. Our perceptions become very narrowed. Our pupils dilate so we can take in a lot of light. Our arms, if we're in fight mode, our arms and our shoulders will get engorged with blood so that we will actually become or appear bigger. Or if we make that intimate calculus, which mostly I notice myself doing this with other men, we're like, can I take him? No, I can't take him. So if that's the assessment that I make on a subcortical level, on a gut level, I'm going to, the blood is going to rush to my legs so I can jet instead of to my arms so I can get down, right? How many of you have been activated in one of those two ways at least once in the last year? Oh, just a few of us. Other of y'all forgot, or you're lying, or you're just too tired to put your hands up. Because we live in a relative state of fight, flight, activation almost all of the time. That is a baseline state for living in Western culture, which is extraordinarily toxic, by the way. It leads to terrible long-term health effects, including lower life expectancy. The body, the organism is not designed to be in a state of fight, flight, threat response alarm. We're not supposed to be at DEFCON 1 or 2 all the time. It's almost as if we have an internal situation room in which we have our fingers poised just above the big red button to go nuclear on anything or anybody, you know, including that girl who don't like my outfit, or that teacher who, you know, hates me and downgraded me on the test for being 5 minutes late, or, you know, my brother who tried to chump me off in order to impress his friends, or all that stuff. The terrible, wonderful, terrible thing about having these creative, imaginative human minds is that the human mind can imagine a threat or create a threat and experience a threat in a psychological or social way, but the body is only capable of responding to it as if it's a threat to life itself. Does that make sense? That's why all we want you to do is give a speech in front of the class. No one will kill you, but one study after another indicates that most people, not including me, are more afraid of public speaking than they are of death. I find that confusing. I speak all day and all night for days on end to avoid death, but some people would not. They're going, will it be fist? Will it be a quick death? Then maybe I will skip the speeches, just doobie. Okay, so I don't want to talk about activism. I want to talk about the brain. And I want to talk about what happens to the brain and the body as a result of oppression. I have a very simple metric for measuring the presence of oppression in a community, in a family, or in an individual body, mind, soul. Unhappiness and unhealthiness. If you are miserable, or people that you know are miserable or unhappy, and if they have chronic health problems, I am saying that's an indication that oppression is present. And if people are happy, vibrant, in robust health, that's an indicator that oppression is, to one extent or another, at bay, relatively speaking. Now, there's the thing about oppression and injustice is that it's structural, it's systemic, and like, I think it was one of the paint companies, Glidden or something like that, they used to talk about it covers the earth. And they show a can of paint pouring over a globe, which seems kind of weird at this point. But that looked like a really cool idea in the 60s and 70s when I was growing up. Actually did community organizing, and I hit upon a major community organizing environmental justice issue. There was a paint factory not 2 or 3 blocks from the office where my community organizing, street level organizing office was. And I remember looking at a car and seeing kind of a purplish sheen on this green car. And I went, huh. And then I looked at the leaves next to that tree, and there was a purplish sheen on the leaves of that tree. And gosh darn it, within a wide radius around the paint plant, there were actually particulates where, as if it had been airbrushed ever so slightly on all of the local plants and automobiles in this neighborhood. And there was an industrial hospital right there too. I didn't have the courage to follow up on that issue, or I would have been a national leader and pioneer in the environmental justice movement, but I did have that insight that something was wrong there. And back to the issue of changing our minds and why we have to. I believe that we live in a traumagenic society, that is a society that thrives upon and is fueled by toxic stress and trauma, meaning that in order to maintain the structure of the patriarchal empire, the capitalist empire, the empire of white supremacy, which are many different ways of looking at an interlocking system which captures all of us in one way or another. The empire of national purity, the empire of heterosexuality and heteronormativity, and the cisgender empire. All of these interlocking systems of violence and structural and institutionalized mistreatment, marginalization, violence, leave a trace of pain and trauma on the nervous system. And can we show the first, I have one image. There was a study that was done some years ago. I'm not going to tell you how long ago because I don't remember. But it's called the ACE study, Adverse Childhood Experiences. How many have heard about the ACE study? Okay, you're going to like this. Or you're going to hate this. This is really nasty. But they studied 17,000 people over a 20-year period and made some startling discoveries about the effect of adverse childhood experience, let's say trauma. And when we say trauma, think oppression. Okay? the effect of adverse childhood experiences on life expectancy and health. Well, I recently took this, and they said, find your ACE score. While you were growing up, during the first 18 years of life, did a parent or adult in your household often or very often swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you? If yes, enter 1. 2, did a parent or adult or in the household often or very often push, grab, or throw something at you? If yes, enter 1. 3, did an adult or a person 5 years older than you ever touch or fondle or have you touched their body in a sexual way? Or attempted to have oral, anal, or vaginal intercourse with you? If yes, enter 1. Yeah, you get the idea. So this goes on for like 10 questions. And I added it all up. My score was a 9. So I'm happy to be alive, because most people with a score that high who are my age are already buried, or they're suffering from chronic drug or alcohol addiction, or they are in prison, or they have major mental health or relationship disorder, meaning they have a failed capacity to initiate and maintain warm, nourishing connections with other human beings. That's what trauma does. If you really want to know what trauma does, besides make you unhappy and sick, in your relationships, it will show up as a diminished capacity to enjoy, give, receive, care, and love on a sustained basis. An impaired capacity to be in community, to contribute your inborn and developed gifts and talents to your communities. That's what trauma will do. So I got 9 out of 10. Next slide. And I thought to myself, this is a great relief to me. This is the figure on the left here is a graph that was developed as a part of the ACE study report. It basically says adverse childhood experiences result in social, emotional, and cognitive impairment. Social impairment, that means it's hard to make and keep friends, or to trust people, or to form nourishing attachments. It's hard to think and concentrate in school. You might get diagnosed with ADHD like I did. You might find yourself feeling persecuted or paranoid or depressed. Yeah, that's what they mean by social, cognitive, emotional impairment. On the right is a progressive relanguaging of the pyramid on the left, which includes 2 additional levels in the green and lavender underneath, but says that adverse child experiences are really about complex or relational developmental trauma. That's trauma that starts early and is sustained over a good period of time. They call it allostatic load, disrupted neurological development. Yes, trauma will interfere with how your brain works. And that's why I'm saying that, well, Bob Marley was right. You know, he gives us an admonition. He says, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our mind. Yes, so we got to do that. Allostatic load is a word which means simply accumulated toxic stress. The mind, the nervous system, metabolizes experience the same way that your gastrointestinal tract, your digestive system, metabolizes food. And if experience comes too intensely, in too overwhelming a manner, we get indigestion in our brains. And that's what we call PTSD. Almost all of us are walking around with a certain level, a little bit or a lot of emotional cognitive PTSD. Oh, I'm running out of time. Fast, Vic, fast. Okay, the ACE study says, hey, we adopt, there's an increase, the more ACEs you have, the more adverse childhood experiences you have, the more likely you are to adopt high-risk behaviors. And that's a pathologizing thing, which social workers, psychologists, educators, police, judges, probation officers have all bought into. That is to say, when we look at what's not working in your life, we're going to describe what's not working in your life in terms of what's wrong with you. Now, I believe that Sister Fania Davis is going to crack that open for us in a really nice way in a little while, so I'm not going to spend too much time on that except to say that if you're in college, chances are you are being trained to do this to people in your world. If you're being trained as a psychologist, if you're being trained as an educator, you are being trained to be part of the gatekeeper class that protects the power elite from everybody else who's sort of miserable, struggling, and unhappy by helping those people to understand all of the suffering in their lives as primarily being their personal problems and deficiencies rather than something that's wrong in this system. And I'm here to tell you, I think it's really the system. It's the system. But the system does back us into a corner and cause us to grasp at straws for coping with the suffering that we endure in a way that is itself counterproductive. So, more ACEs, more coping strategies, then more disease, more distress. Oh, we get criminalized, we get stigmatized, and yes, we die sooner. Now, somebody with with an ACE score as high as mine has a general life expectancy that's 20 years less than the general population. So I should be dead already. And I have family members who died much like a decade before they reached the age that I am now, who had more or less the same kind of experiences that I have, but I spent from the age 13 onward, probably from age 7, and that's a longer story than I have time for, working on healing myself. There were two things that I did that I think that made it possible for me to still be alive today. One of them is I became a social activist. That is, I became a part of communities of thought and action wherein the suffering that I experienced, I began to tell a new story about it. And I was in a community of people that were telling a different kind of story about what was hurting me and what was hurting us. So I wasn't just feeling that suffering all by myself. I wasn't just feeling like, oh, I'm homeless because my mom ain't shit. And neither am I. And neither is my dad. Or I was sexually abused because I am shameful and worthless. Or I am depressed because I'm weak and I'm a failure. Those were the stories that I told myself, and those were the stories I began to unlearn in the course of working in activist communities. But as I was also working in activist communities, which were analyzing and critiquing the causes and trying to take preventive or remedial steps to undo those causes, I still had the suffering. I still had the pain. I still had the depression. So I was, at the same time I was being a social activist, in one silo. I was in another silo studying self-hypnosis. I was in this silo studying humanistic psychology as a 13-year-old, as a 14-year-old, as a 15-year-old. I used to steal yoga books from the library and stuff them down my pants and go home and try to do yoga in our apartment in the projects before we got evicted. And I never stopped because I was in so much pain. I thought it would be stupid for me to not try to find some medicine, some direct healing for my heart, mind, and brain. And it turns out that activism is part of the solution, because the organization of society has dramatic impacts on our health and happiness. Right? That if your mom can't pay the bills and is wondering if the eviction notice is going to come, doesn't that kind of mess up playtime and dinner time and the weekend? There are probably people in here that have not yet had your first vacation. Like, I never went on vacation until I was what they call a grown-ass man. You know, we could go to the park for a picnic. So here's the kind of things that in society, in just 3 or 4 more minutes, I'm going to try to run through these points. Stress, in one study, showed, this is called the Whitehall study, check that out. Whitehall is one word, and it's a British study, that high demand in your life, in work, in school, and low control over your circumstances has adverse health effects. Shocker, right? And guess what? Social support is protective, so that if you have good friends and plenty, and if you have good comrades and plenty who can help you tell new stories about what hurts and why, and if you can work together to fight, to change those things which have caused hurt in your life, that is also protective and healing. If there is an imbalance between the amount of effort that you put in and the amount of reward that you get, guess what? That's toxic to your health and your happiness. Somebody say amen. Oh, guess what? Insecurity, in terms of your capacity to secure those things that you need in order to make your life okay, like money to pay the bills, money for recreation, leisure time, quality relationships, that's toxic. But friends and allies make all the difference. So, in conclusion, I'm just going to suggest that the mind and the brain are occupied territory, and that we now have the technical knowledge and understanding and the technologies, the tools to change our brain. I don't have time to go into all of them, but I'm going to I have about 40 copies of an article that I wrote about how I transformed a specific trauma in my life, which was witnessing the death of a sibling, and how that drove me on a path of healing for 45 years, and then one day in 45 minutes, that trauma just collapsed. And it changed my life so that I'm still here. Thank you. So it's really not just about changing the world, focusing on what you need to do in order to reclaim, restore, and protect your personal health and happiness is foundational to the revolution to change the world. Thank you. I don't know if we have time for any questions or not. Pardon? Good. So I'm happy to hear reflections or questions. Yes? That's right. Oh, let me pass it out right now. Thank you. Because I would have straight forgot. I still have the ADHD, which mostly means I'm really excited about everything. Could I get you to pass those in a couple different directions? A few stacks. I don't think I have enough for everybody, but I will make a PDF available to the conference organizer so that you can pick it up on the school website or something like that. Yes. Yeah, I think that all these things that we consider private business, that is bunk. A primary function of private business, family business, is to keep people who are in pain isolated from other people who are in pain, so we can't make sense of where the pain is coming from and what we should do about it together. So I say find safe places to tell all your business.
If you had someone who say was like a non-lecturer, what would you recommend that they do? Where do you recommend that they talk about changing the mind, changing the brain?
A very common landing spot, soft landing for a lot of people with high ACE scores is in 12-step programs. One thing I don't love about the 12-step programs is they're apolitical. One thing I do love about the 12-step programs is you can tell all your business, and people will say, "I've been there. I can relate to that." But I would say get healing and get busy in a community as an activist. Find at least two struggles. One in which you are a target, as female, as woman, as queer, as gender nonconforming, as working class, as immigrant, and one struggle in which you have been trained and located as an oppressor. And the second one is one in which you're going to have to do a whole lot of education and find a whole lot of humility and patience and learn to grapple and transcend your shame, because guess what? We've all been involuntarily recruited into positions of domination and superiority over others, and positions of subordination and marginalization relative to others as well. None of us asked for any of that. But we do have to take responsibility on both ends of that conditioning for being a part of the solution. Other questions or reflections? Yes, sir.
What differentiates you from others with similar ACE scores who have not had as nice of an existence or are not now?
Honey, my existence is not nice. I still struggle. I struggle every day. And there are things, for me, I would say one is that I have a gift, which is an irrepressibly curious mind. I didn't earn that. I was born with it. And I believe that my curiosity and the power of my intellect has helped me to survive. But I would add that the power of my grandma also helped me to survive. because even though she never completed high school, she was able to recognize me as one of those kids that if I had been raised in a middle-class family, I would have been shunted into a gifted and talented track as a kid. But instead, I was sent to the office for being a disruptive influence in a boring-ass classroom, and eventually dropped out of high school and stuff like that. So I would say that my grandmother was my first and primary ally as a young person, and she kept me alive. She even confided in me that it was her mission to do so. I'm here for you. This is what I'm here on this planet to do, is to keep you together until you're 16, because then I know you'll be okay. And lo and behold, when I was 16 years old, she died. And then I remembered what she said, and I'm like, wow, she's completed her mission, so she's on to other things now. And I found communities of care. I think my alternative high school that I went to was sort of like the island of misfit toys. And we formed a tribe of, like, no matter how jacked up and orphaned you feel or you are, you can be with us. And I fell in love with that community, graduated from there, went to college, came back, taught high school there for several years, and have been engaged in learning communities and activist communities and healing communities ever since. And so I think that what distinguishes me from a lot of people is that even though I was not raised in a context where nourishing information was easy to find, I found it anyway. That I went to the public library in my town when I was 13 years old and 14 years old, and for months, my favorite book was the card catalog. Many of y'all probably don't even know what the card catalog is. But it was like, just imagine the whole Amazon bookstore browse on index cards. And I would read, and I would read the card catalog. I probably put 100 hours into the card catalog so that I would understand the branches of knowledge. But that I would say was a function of my curiosity drive. Yes?
Does the age studies have any age relation? I mean, there's a lot of early childhood trauma, but then there's some kind of an intervention that moves the child out of that situation.
Yeah, they've done some analyses of the original 17,000 data to try to identify protective factors or resilience factors. So things like a school teacher or a grandparent. For me, it was also my 6th grade school teacher. I went to an all-white elementary school in 5th and 6th grade, meaning I was the only black kid in the class. And our science teacher was a black woman from Dallas. And she brought my mom to school and said, you have a really unusually intellectually gifted child, and you should take him out of here. And even though my mother didn't do that, I could feel Ms. Cooper's like trying to look out for me. And I remembered that forever. And I've been trying to find her. I don't know if she's still alive or not. Don't remember her first name, but I so wanted to thank Mrs. Cooper. I'm like, Ms. Cooper, I came out okay. I just want you to know. Thank you for all you did. So as a gatekeeper class, you may have come from below. You're in college now. In all likelihood, if you're not going, give it a shot. And you become part of this class. If you use that location to empower those little ruffians in your, under your wing, it can make a difference. You can't know how much of a difference you make in their lives. But I would invite and encourage you to assume that you can inoculate a young person against death and the path to death with one meeting based on the force of your heart and mind in their lives. Because I think it's true. And if you think it's true too, you're more likely to show up in their lives in a way that proves that it's true. Does that make sense? I could do this all night, but tell me when to stop.
Do you still practice some of those exercises such as yoga?
Yes. Yeah, I do dance as a spiritual practice. I do yoga as a health practice. I meditate. I cry almost every day. And until I was in my 30s, almost nothing could get me to cry except for severe physical pain, like getting my thumb slammed in a car door. But I wanted to reclaim my emotional apparatus because, damn it, it's mine, and I didn't want it locked up in the prison of compulsive masculinity. So not a day goes by when I don't do a restorative, renewing, resilience-building spiritual practice because it's good for me. And and if you develop an appetite for what's good for you, and even if you have some, not so healthy appetites too, I've eaten like whole rows of Oreo cookies and pints of, and smoked and drank and popped and snorted and have had a wide range of entertaining coping experiences. But I get the most mileage out of things that are good for me and good for other people and that I have control over. Again, the less control we feel over our life, the more toxic it is on our happiness and health. And one of the things that we do have control over is our minds. And it might feel like that we're slaves to our minds, which I have felt. I suffer from chronic depression. I spent over 15 years on antidepressants. I've been completely antidepressant free for over a decade, but that's after decades of inner work. Decades. And I reclaimed my brain from chronic depression and some of the more severe effects of PTSD. And it's really worth doing. And I think that it's revolutionary. It'll make you a much better soldier for change in the service of whatever people, places, and things that you love.